Okay, it's late. I'm in the practice space. I've been working on playing drums for a project that I've got an audition for coming up. We'll see how it goes. I haven't played drums in a really, really long time, but I figured while I had everything set up that I'd spend some time talking about drumming for Screamo and kind of an introductory approach to drumming. I myself am, not an expert drummer, so this is going to be pretty basic. But I thought I'd kind of just go through and talk a little bit about the history of kind of like rock drumming, and in the process introduce you to a few different rhythms that you'll probably want to utilize if you're going to get into drumming for Screamo, drumming for post-hardcore, and so on. So if you've ever heard rock music before, you probably heard a beat that is like the common groove. It's descended from jazz and R&B. Those rhythms originally came to the U.S. through the slave trade, through black people and African traditions. There's like one in particular that's like just extremely common, and you probably heard it a million times. It's like that beat is such a ubiquitous part of rock music at this point. And if you go back to early R&B and whatnot, you hear tons of examples of that. And it's a little bit more shuffly, a little bit more complicated usually, but that's the general gist. If you dig around, though, in a lot of rock music, you'll eventually find some other rhythms that were appropriated as well. Sometimes they kind of go what I would refer to as top down, the most common one being what they call like the Motown groove, which goes... And that also comes from New Orleans jazz. It also like entered through R&B and became rock music eventually, or became commonplace in rock music eventually. Some of the top-down patterns that you hear in Screamo most frequently are also kind of like directly lifted from West African tradition, from Yoruba music specifically. There's like these rhythmic cells that you hear a lot that kind of follow certain ostinatos, certain guitar playing patterns in Screamo that are pretty much, they come from the same source. Like maybe you've heard this one. It goes like... Those rhythms, also originally stemmed from West African tradition. You would hear those in bell patterns for like shepherds thousands of years ago and stuff like that. And it's just become a big part of rock music. It's a very ham-fisted approach within Screamo to kind of like play along with like big octaves and really angular riffs with those kinds of patterns, and not so much follow that traditional rock groove sound. So another place that jazz started pulling rhythms from was Eastern European music, and that eventually bled into post-hardcore and Screamo too. One of the most common ones, I think, is like Armenian or Hungarian, I can't remember, but it's like the Mission Impossible rhythm, and you hear this all over Screamo too. Like, that time is 5/4, right? I'm counting 5 on the ride cymbal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm going dun 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 dun. You get it. The song that probably like first popularized that rhythm was Take 5 actually, but I think in this day and age most people probably know the Mission Impossible rhythm more so than they know Take 5. Another really common thing in post-hardcore and Screamo is just blast beating, which is very, very basic. There's 2 general forms of it. One where you play the ride and the kick at the same time, and then you alternate the snare. So you go. Or you can play ride and snare at the same time and then play halftime with the kick. That's another really common one. Another thing I'll probably recommend is like always be filling, right? Like you want to fill as frequently as possible. Maybe you're not grooving, or maybe you're not doing those kind of like top-down beats that I described, but you definitely kind of want to get lots of like tom feel in. You want to move around a lot. That's going to really help you open up the sound. Think about how you can write beats that really heavily accent the guitar part that you're writing. And depending upon what you're doing, it might also be D-beating occasionally, which is sort of like which is very similar to our old school rock and roll groove, right? Except it's just kind of like double time feel. If you want to get good at playing drums, I recommend just sitting down in a kit and trying to spend some time fooling around and seeing if you can just play along with some simple grooves. Like pretty much everybody starts with a and then they move up from there. You should always play with a metronome if you're trying to get better at playing drums. And have at it. I hope that was helpful.